The desert has a way of playing tricks on your mind. The heat, the isolation, the endless stretches of sand and rock that all look the same. But sometimes what you see out there isn't a trick at all. Sometimes it's something far worse. And if you're unlucky enough to be stationed in the remote corners of the American Southwest, you might just encounter something that the military would prefer you never talk about. This is one of those stories. A patrol that started as routine and ended with a group of hardened soldiers questioning everything they thought they knew about reality. This is the story of the night a military unit came face to face with what the Navajo call a skinwalker. The boundary between the known and the unknown is thinner than most people realize. Beyond it lie encounters that defy logic and challenge our understanding of the natural world. These are the stories that get buried in classified reports, dismissed as hallucinations, or simply forgotten. You alone must decide what to believe as you venture into the fog of war. Sergeant, you seeing this? Keep your eyes forward, Mitchell. It's probably just a coyote. That ain't no coyote, Sarge. That thing's walking on two legs. The year was 2003, and Specialist Ryan Donovan was fresh out of advanced individual training. Like thousands of other young soldiers before him, he'd been assigned to Fort Huachuca in southern Arizona, not far from the Mexican border. The base had been operational since the late 1800s, originally established as a frontier outpost during the Apache Wars. Now it served as a training ground for military intelligence and electronic warfare specialists. But the desert surrounding the base remained as wild and unforgiving as it had been over a century ago. For Donovan and his squad, guard duty was just another part of the job. The military operates around the clock, and even in peacetime, bases need constant surveillance. Perimeter patrols were routine, mundane even. Walk the fence line, check for breaches, report anything unusual, and try not to fall asleep standing up. It was the kind of duty that made you appreciate how boring military life could actually be. But that was about to change. It was a Thursday night in October when Donovan's squad was assigned to patrol the southeastern perimeter of the base. The area was particularly desolate, bordered by miles of scrubland and rocky outcroppings that stretched towards the Huachuca Mountains. The nearest town was over 20 miles away, and the only sounds were the wind whistling through the desert brush and the occasional howl of coyotes in the distance. The squad consisted of 6 soldiers, led by Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, a 12-year veteran who'd done tours in Kosovo and Iraq. Chen was known for being level-headed and professional, not the type to let his imagination run wild or tolerate nonsense from his troops. Alongside Donovan were specialists Amanda Torres, Brian Mitchell, and James Keating, plus Private First Class David Okonkwo. All of them were young, fit, and trained to handle threats both foreign and domestic. None of them were prepared for what they were about to encounter. The patrol began at 2200 hours, just as the last traces of twilight disappeared from the western horizon. Chen split the squad into 2 fire teams, with himself leading Donovan and Torres along the south fence line, while Mitchell, Keating, and Okonkwo covered the eastern section. They would reconvene at Checkpoint Delta in approximately 2 hours. Standard procedure, nothing out of the ordinary. At first, everything went according to plan. The soldiers walked their designated routes, scanning the darkness with night vision goggles and thermal imaging equipment. The desert was alive with the heat signatures of small animals, jackrabbits, rattlesnakes, the occasional fox. But around 2340 hours, Mitchell radioed in with something unusual. Alpha 1, this is Bravo team. We've got movement approximately 300 meters northeast of our position. Thermal's picking up something big. Chen responded immediately. Copy that, Bravo. Can you identify?
There was a pause, longer than there should have been. When Mitchell's voice came back over the radio, there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before. Negative, Alpha 1. Whatever it is, it's moving on 2 legs, upright, human-sized, maybe bigger. Chen frowned. The area they were patrolling was restricted military property. Civilians caught trespassing could face serious charges, but it did happen occasionally. Smugglers, thrill seekers, sometimes just lost hikers who'd wandered too far from the trail. Bravo team, hold your position. We're moving to your location. As Chen's fire team made their way toward Bravo's location, Donovan felt a creeping sense of unease. The desert had gone strangely quiet. The coyotes had stopped howling and even the wind seemed to have died down. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl, the kind that every instinct told you was wrong. When they reached Bravo team's position, all 6 soldiers stood together, their weapons at the ready, scanning the darkness. Mitchell pointed toward a cluster of rocks about 200 meters out. "It was right there, Sarge. I swear it was watching us." Chen raised his night vision and swept the area. Nothing, just rocks and shadow. Could have been a person, could have been an animal standing on its hind legs. Bears do that sometimes. Torres shook her head. "Sergeant, there are no bears in this part of Arizona. Haven't been for decades." "That it was a person," Chen said, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "Stay alert. If there's someone out here, we need to." That's when they heard it. A sound that shouldn't exist, a noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It started as a low, guttural growl, almost subsonic, something you felt in your chest more than you heard with your ears. Then it shifted, rising in pitch until it became a shriek that sounded disturbingly human. But no human throat could produce a sound like that, something so filled with rage and hunger and wrongness. "What the hell was that?" Okonkwo's voice cracked as he said it, his rifle swinging wildly toward the source of the sound. Chen's training kicked in. "Defensive formation. Safety's off. Torres, radio base command. Tell them we have a possible hostile contact." As Torres fumbled with the radio, Donovan's thermal imaging picked up the heat signature again. It was closer now, maybe 150 meters, moving with unnatural speed across the desert floor. And it wasn't alone. 2 more signatures appeared on his scope, flanking the first, moving in perfect coordination like a pack of predators surrounding their prey. "Sarge, I've got 3 contacts, closing fast from the northeast." Chen saw them too. "Challenge them. Standard protocol." Mitchell stepped forward and shouted into the darkness. "This is United States Army. Identify yourself. You are on restricted military property." The only response was another one of those inhuman shrieks, closer now, close enough that they could hear the scrape of something moving through the brush. And then, illuminated by the pale light of the half-moon, they saw it. The thing that emerged from the darkness walked upright like a man, but that was where the resemblance ended. It was tall, easily 7 feet, with limbs that were too long and joints that bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. Its skin was pale and hairless in some places, covered in matted fur in others, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. But the worst part was the face. It had the elongated snout of a canine, but the eyes were almost human. They reflected the moonlight with an intelligence that was utterly terrifying. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. 6 trained soldiers stood frozen, confronted with something that defied every rational explanation they'd ever been given. The creature tilted its head, studying them with those 2 human eyes, and then it smiled. Actually smiled, revealing rows of yellowed teeth that looked like they belonged in the mouth of a wolf. Chen's voice was steady, but Donovan could hear the fear underneath. "Fall back, slow and steady, do not run." They started backing away, keeping their weapons trained on the creature. But as they moved, the 2 other signatures on Donovan's thermal scope began to close in from the flanks. They were being herded, corralled like livestock by something that seemed to know exactly what it was doing. "Sarge, we've got 2 more coming in from the sides." "I see them. Keep moving. If they charge, light them up." The creatures didn't charge. Instead, they followed, matching the soldiers' pace step by step, staying just outside effective range. It was as if they were playing with their prey, drawing out the fear, savoring it. Donovan's heart hammered in his chest. He'd trained for combat. He'd trained for terrorist attacks and active shooters and chemical weapons. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Torres was still trying to raise base command, but the radio was filled with static. "Sergeant, I can't get through. Something's jamming the signal." "Keep trying." They'd backed up almost half a mile when the lead creature suddenly stopped. It threw back its head and let out one of those bone-chilling howls. This time the sound was answered by others in the distance. How many were out there? 5? 10? More? Kading's nerve finally broke. "We need to run, now!" "Negative," Chen's voice was sharp. "You run, you die. These things are predators. They'll chase." "How do you know what they'll do, Sarge? Ever seen anything like this before?" Chen didn't answer, because the truth was, he hadn't. None of them had. The standoff continued for another 15 minutes. The longest 15 minutes of Donovan's life. The creatures circled at a distance, occasionally darting forward before retreating again, testing the soldiers' resolve. And then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they vanished. One moment they were there, visible in the thermal imaging and night vision. The next moment, nothing. Just empty desert. "Where'd it go?" Mitchell's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know," Chen admitted. "But we're not waiting around to find out. Double time back to base. Move." The squad ran. Military discipline be damned, they ran like their lives depended on it, because they absolutely did. They could hear things moving in the darkness around them, keeping pace, matching their speed. Every shadow seemed to hide something with teeth and claws and those terrible, intelligent eyes. They burst through the base perimeter gate 40 minutes later, gasping and wild-eyed. The guard on duty took one look at them and reached for his phone. Within minutes, the squad was separated and taken in for debriefing. They were questioned individually by officers from base intelligence, their stories recorded and compared. And here's where it gets interesting. All 6 soldiers reported seeing the same things, the same creatures, the same behavior, the same details down to the way the lead creature had smiled at them. But officially, nothing happened that night. The incident report filed by Staff Sergeant Chen was classified and buried. The soldiers were given psychological evaluations and told in no uncertain terms that discussing what they'd seen would result in disciplinary action. Donovan later learned that similar encounters had been reported by military personnel in the region going back decades. Patrols that encountered things in the desert. Things that walked like men but weren't. Things that the Navajo Nation, whose reservation bordered the military land, had been warning about for centuries. The Navajo call them Yi-Not-Loshi, Skinwalkers, witches who've committed the ultimate taboo and gained the ability to transform into animals or wear their skins. According to tradition, they're practitioners of the darkest magic, individuals who've murdered their own family members to gain supernatural powers. And they're always hungry. In Navajo culture, even speaking about skinwalkers is considered dangerous. It's believed that talking about them can draw their attention, invite them into your life. But Donovan learned something that night in the desert, something that no amount of military training could have taught him. There are things in this world that exist beyond our understanding, things that live in the spaces between what we know and what we fear. And sometimes, those things are watching us. Staff Sergeant Chen retired from the military 3 years after the incident. He never spoke publicly about what happened that night, but those who knew him said he never quite was the same. Mitchell transferred to a different base within 6 months. Torres left the army altogether. Keating and Okonkwo finished their enlistments and disappeared into civilian life. And Donovan started researching. He found dozens of similar reports from military personnel stationed in the Southwest, encounters that were dismissed, explained away, were simply erased from official records. He even found Native American accounts going back centuries, describing creatures that matched what he and his squad had seen. He even found reports from the Spanish conquistadors who first explored the region in the 1500s, describing devil beasts that walked upright and hunted men. The military, of course, denies everything. There are no official records of Skinwalker encounters, no investigations, no acknowledgement that anything unusual has ever occurred on or near Fort Huachuca. But ask anyone who's served there, especially those who've pulled night patrols in the remote sections of the base. They might hear a different story. They might hear about the things they saw in the desert, the things that shouldn't exist. Because out there in the darkness, beyond the fence lines and the floodlights and the illusion of safety, something is watching. Something ancient and hungry and utterly inhuman. And it's waiting for the next patrol to venture a little too far into its territory. The Battle of Alcatraz isn't the only classified military encounter that's been buried in the archives. Unlike that prison siege, which at least made it into the history books eventually, some incidents are deemed too disturbing, too unbelievable to ever see the light of day. This is one of those stories, and the soldiers who lived through it carry the memory like a scar, a reminder that reality is far stranger and more terrifying than we're led to believe. The desert keeps its secrets well, but sometimes, when the wind is right and the moon is high, you can still hear them out there, howling, watching, waiting for the next group of soldiers to learn what Staff Sergeant Chen and his squad learned that October night. Some things are real, whether we believe in them or not. And some patrols never end, not really. The soldiers come back to base, file their reports, and go on with their lives. But part of them stays out there in the desert, frozen in that moment when they realized that everything they thought they knew about the world was wrong. When they looked into those two human eyes and understood that they weren't at the top of the food chain after all. If you've served in the Southwest, particularly around Fort Huachuca or the other bases near Navajo Nation territory, you might have your own stories. You might have seen things on night patrol that you can't explain. Things that made you question your sanity. And if you have, you're not alone. Dozens, maybe hundreds of service members have encountered the same phenomena. Most of them stay silent, bound by classification or fear of ridicule. But the stories persist. They always do. Because truth has a way of surviving even when it's buried under layers of denial and official secrecy. The Skinwalkers are real. The soldiers who've encountered them know this, and now so do you.